let's start with former Prime Minister, or Prime Minister, you say. If you're France is a nice country, because if you've been Prime Minister, you're always called Prime Minister. I say that as a former Prime Minister, so we are in the same.
And being a former Prime Minister lasts longer than being Prime Minister.
Distinctly so, yes, I noticed. So, Prime Minister, an honor to have you here. Former Prime Minister of France, but also in the present, you are leader of the Republican majority coalition in the Assemblée Nationale. So not only a former, like myself, but a present, active and significant politicians from France. So please, Mr. Tal, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for inviting me on this panel with this so important topic. Because what we are talking about is, of course, Ukraine. It's freedom, it's security. But through Ukraine, we are talking about Europe and its project. And I'm from a generation that only knew the European Union, that only knew the single currency, that only knew enlargement and the political project for the EU. And I think my generation thought that we were experiencing the beginning of something, and a genuine European project. And now there's a huge doubt on whether we were experiencing the beginning of something or the end of something. And we don't want to see in the history books in the coming decades, 1945, 2025, the European parenthesis. And I think this is the risk today. And all the speeches we have about autonomic strategy, about the European defense, about the European project, relies on the capacity we will have to help Ukraine prevail facing the Russian aggression. So the good news we have is that in France, the voters, because it's the question, and the French citizens still support Ukraine. We had a poll this weekend. More than 70% of the French citizens ask us to keep on supporting Ukraine, to keep on helping Ukraine, and even to increase our help to Ukraine. The question for the panel is what security guarantees? But security guarantees is the question that we will ask if we have a peace agreement that Ukraine can accept. And before that, we have to put some pressure in order to find this peace agreement that Ukraine can accept. And of course, we are all, I think, in doubt after the declarations we saw, and that's why our president is currently in Washington, D.C. to meet with Donald Trump in order to convince him to support a peace treaty or a peace agreement with Ukraine and not in the back of Ukraine. Then about security guarantees, we spoke about this all day. I think many people are agree on the fact that NATO membership, Article 5, is the easiest and more efficient way. But I'm always surprised that the EU membership is never mentioned as a security guarantee. For many people, the EU membership is mainly or only an economic issue. But Europe, or the European Union, is not only a single market, it's also a political project. And I think we have to push the EU membership of Ukraine also as a security guarantee. With my MPs in the parliament, we just voted a resolution to ask for the French government and the EU institutions to accelerate the process for Ukraine's EU membership. We should all have a goal to have Ukraine as an EU member in 2 years. They passed some huge reforms, and they are continuing passing reforms. And so I think if we believe in the EU, its project, and its future, we have to place the EU membership as a security guarantee as well.
Thank you very much. And lots to talk about there. Before I come to the rest of the panel, former Prime Minister, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions picking up on what you had to say. France has been pushing for a long time the idea of strategic autonomy. Do you feel that the rest of Europe is finally ready to listen, and do you have a project you can put on the table?
Well, I grew up hearing that European defense, strategic autonomy was completely impossible. And we saw the last years, some huge progress being made. The possibility to have a unity regarding sanctions against Russia, the possibility to have a joint intervention with the Takuba force in some African countries, the possibility to send, as the EU, some weapons to another country, to Ukraine. So these are progress that show that it's possible. And I think the results in Germany, we just saw yesterday, is also a good sign. I heard Friedrich Merz's comments yesterday talking about European independence, which is a very strong word. And in France, we've been pushing for this zero dependence regarding energy, regarding defense, regarding industry and innovation. The question that is being asked today is, what do we want to become as a continent and as a political project? Do we want to become the world's nursing home or a holiday resort? Or do we want to become a power capable to be a rival with China and the US, and of course Russia?
Okay, one more question though. The panel title says the voters as well. And I was talking to people in Britain about, obviously, given Donald Trump's unpredictability, it makes total sense for Britain to work much more closely with France and Germany now, even after Brexit. But then somebody said to me, yeah, but how do we have any guarantee that in 2027 France won't also go to the political extremes, and then that project falls apart? So how much reassurance can you give to people here that that won't happen?
You know, I remember in 2017, many people were saying that France would, comment on dit basculer? Yeah, would turn also to the extremes. I've been hearing it again in 2022, and it didn't happen. So my job with my MPs is to make sure it doesn't happen in 2027. And, you know, I think what we've been seeing in France over the last years is also an ideological victory about the support to Ukraine and the support to the EU. Because the difference between France and other European countries, I think, or other countries, is that our populists, our extremes, are now in the debate hiding the fact that they don't want to help Ukraine or they don't want to be in the EU anymore. A few years ago, they were saying, we don't have to help Ukraine. A few years ago, they were saying, we have to leave the EU. Now they're hiding it, and that they changed their speech, because I think they can feel that the French citizens do not want that project. And so in the end, I think the French citizen will choose the genuine European project that will be presented to us.
Okay, thanks. Carl, do you want to pick it up?
Yes, and if I might add to what you say, I mean, the big strategic shift that I noticed a couple of years ago, which was really big, was when France went to a country being hesitant at best towards the enlargement of the EU, against or hesitant, to being enthusiastic supporter and endorsing the EU perspective of Ukraine. That was a big jump. That was unexpected and highly significant, because when France went on board there, all of the EU went on board. And that means that there is now a solid majority, but not more than a solid majority in the European Union for something that some years ago was, I was around the table in those years, was absolutely unthinkable. It was unthinkable that Ukraine was going to be a member of the European Union. And France was fairly skeptical, to put it mildly. Now France is on board for that. So that is a strategic shift of some significance that has occurred. So thank you for that, I have to say. We have also in our panel several elected members of different parliaments, and I think it's important to get your voices on the challenges that you see ahead, both in terms of what needs to be done, what EU can do, what others can do, and what conceivably you can get your voters to accept. Start with Miapetra Kumpula-Natri, member of Parliament of Finland, but also prior to that with extensive experience as member of the European Parliament. Please.
Oh yes, thank you. I speak from my points of view, not necessarily what is official lines, but I come from the nation and from Finland, which is like 110% behind Ukraine. So it's easy also have free thinking what needs to be done, because I have full support behind and Finland is really, really dedicated. Comes from the history, and if you check last part of my name, Natri, it's a village by the Lake Lagoda, which used to be part of Finland. So my husband's name. So every Finland knows the story, and still we were changing opinions fast. And this is what I think needs to be done in many European Union countries. European Union has been supportive, but it's really time for a recheck if we want to be a strong continent. So opinions, I just remind. 24th February 22, support of Finnish joining NATO was around 22%. We applied 18th of May, and the opinion polls were 85. Before President and Prime Minister officially took stand, they were preparing, but they were speaking and telling the nation what is it about. So I call many countries to recheck what is their opinion of the people, what story they are told. Is it gas price? Is it price of life? Is it price of their security and the own continent that we work for? So 3 points, maybe adding what I have been hearing here today. Talk, time is over. We have been promising 3 years. Now we have to deliver. Otherwise, we are actually not failing supporting Ukraine, but we are failing what we have promised. And that is humiliation for quite many nations. So now time for actions. So number 2, do we have possibilities? Is EU, has it done everything? Not much talked here on the trade policies. And now we have one businessman on the table we want to get into. Businessman. We are the biggest business region in the world. European internal markets. We have more than 70, or is it exactly 70 trade deals. We have unratified trade deals ready, because not everyone has checked what is happening in the world. And I recall also my colleagues in the European Parliament, the former colleagues, there's things that you can ratify. Mercosur, not perfect, but good can be done. And immediately, a little bit deeper. What could it mean? Because Trump is not making the trade difficult only for Europe, it's making it difficult for Canada, for southern neighbors. We can be more active. On the sanctions, I worked for sanctions until this summer in the European Parliament. It's not perfect, not everything is done, not every single country 27 times do the same thing. It's more than 1 year. Van der Leyen said we should be more coordinated, but we are not perfectly yet. So we can speed up something that has been planned, also if we wish. I visited here. I saw the weapons collected on the Ukrainian ground with Western chips. That was, I was working theoretically. Now I saw them. I touched them. And I have peace in my pocket as a memory. We cannot say we've done everything in Europe perfectly already. And finally, my third point, I'm now working as a vice chair for the Council of Europe, the longest serving institution for human rights. Talk to your citizens about not convention of human rights, talk about reality. Are they not supporting getting back deported children? Are they not supportive for having the civilians and prisoners of war tortured? Are they ready to forget all these rules for war and even international order? We have been working in the Council of Europe for sanctions, the register of damage, but it's still to be negotiated, finalized, the special court for war criminals. As a parliamentarians, we only can back the governments. Please speed up.
Thank you very much. At the risk of home country favouritism, I think I'll turn to the British MP over there, identifiable by the Union Jack on his shirt. But there's also a reason for it, though, because Keir Starmer spoke in the session this morning with President Zelensky by video link, and he's talked quite explicitly about Britain's willingness to commit troops to a peacekeeping operation, a reassurance operation it's sometimes called. But he also said that for that to happen, there would have to be a US backstop. So I wondered if you could talk a bit about that, and if that US backstop, the willingness to come in if there's a fight, is how I understood that. If that isn't there, does that mean Britain and France can't go in?
Thank you, Gideon. As a British Labour MP, and we are a party of the left, I just want to start with a Gramsci quote where he says, "The crisis consists precisely in the fact the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And in this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. We are living in a world where the post-1945 consensus is going. And so we need to find new ways of dealing with the world. And also it's a battle where this new world is a world based on democracy or autocracy. And those are the morbid symptoms of autocracy. And for us to win that battle of ideas, the new world to be the world that we want to see, with democratic values, human rights at its centre, it'll finish here in Ukraine. And that's why the Prime Minister is willing to put British lives, for the first time in a long time, on the line here in Ukraine. But we need to involve the US in that new world. The US needs to be part of that new world, but in a way that's acceptable to the President of the US, that's way acceptable to the people of the US. And so the Prime Minister is trying to navigate that terrain. And that's why he's also going, like the President Macron is going. He's going to Washington, D.C. this week on Wednesday to have those same conversations, to send those same messages, and to look at the same opportunities and options. And I think that in some ways the UK has got a certain strength on this, because in our parliament, apart from maybe one very small party, there is strong political consensus. Our delegation here consists of the 4 largest parties in our parliament. Every single one of those 4 largest parties agrees with the Prime Minister that we should put British troops into peacekeeping or stabilisation force in Ukraine with a backstop from the US. And also we need to work much more closely with our allies in Europe and to build that force from our own resources within NATO and within Europe.
Thanks very much. Carl.
I don't expect you to know her views on everything, but what is a backstop of the United States?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the things to explore. It's also what I think the most important concept in this backstop is, one, will it work? Will it work both as deterrent and actuality? Is it something, with a specific example of Ukraine, that President Zelensky will agree to? And obviously, most importantly, something that President Trump will agree to. I don't think, I'll be honest, and I might be wrong, I don't think the Prime Minister is going to the US saying, this is the backstop, here was what we expect you to provide. But as we know from this whole war, and we don't want to rewrite history, President Zelensky has been very good at knowing exactly what Ukrainians need at the time they need it. And maybe if we were going to rewrite history a little, we would go back to 2.5 years and look again at the request for the way the Ukrainians put it, to close the sky, to provide that no-fly zone, that air support, which is what we did in other countries before, as NATO with the US. And maybe wouldn't be where we are today. And so I think now, because this was 3 years in, and the war is not conclusive, and we are facing this challenge, we're having to find new ways.
No, there's no question that some sort of support or some sort of contribution by the Americans would be highly desirable. No question about that. But I'm just sort of having a question mark whether, and Gideon had the same question, whether the European contribution should be completely dependent upon the Americans. We are from Finland and Sweden here. We are now members of NATO. We are happy with that. But it has to be said that for a generation, we were prepared to defend our territories without a backstop from the United States. We had a nuclear deterrence hanging there somewhere, but we were not dependent upon American troops or aircrafts or ships or whatever. And I think Finland was fairly defensible. I think Sweden was fairly defensible. Now we are better with the backstop, but I wouldn't make everything entirely depend upon that. But that was just my comment. It is desirable to have the Americans there, no question about it. But if the Americans were to back away, I'm not quite certain whether we Europeans should back away as well.
Well, maybe Prime Minister Keir Starmer is taking less from Donald Trump and starting a negotiation at the high point.
Yeah, and we have now learned that there are different ways of starting negotiation these days. So it's we are living in a somewhat different world these days.
Yeah.
We have Pavel Fischer, Czech Republic, head of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Parliament of the Czech Republic. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm chairing the Committee for Foreign Relations, Security and Defense. And in these times, this is extremely practical because you have the direct feeling of what is coming from far away comes by the link of cyber or other threats and becomes a danger for your own citizens. And at the very beginning of this panel, Karl Bildt, I think, introduced some of us that we are elected. And just I will give you one small example of what it is about. For a former diplomat, I used to work with the late President Václav Havel in the 90s. And then I was a diplomat for my country. And once you jump in the arena, you just do not know how to sell what you want to do and what you can do. And for a diplomat, believe me or not, it is not always easy to be outspoken in the public. And at the end of the day, you discover that even though you do not sell too much promises for your constituency, you have a public that follows. Even though you do not put sugar in every single message that you have, but you are bold in terms of naming the challenges that we see, people understand. My last election was in September, and I'm a member of the Senate, so it means that you have a constituency that you are supposed to be known, recognized, and supported in. And my strategy was simple. I told myself I will not sell them something that I will not do, and I couldn't do during my second term. So I kept speaking about Chinese threat, Russian threat, occupation of Ukraine, the necessity of helping Ukraine to stand for us and with us, because the stake is much higher. This is the whole architecture of Europe, which is and maybe globally, with the ramification with Iran and North Korea, that is really here. And believe me or not, I was deep in my heart not sure, because we feel how strong can be the manipulation on the social media in these days. We know that the entire public opinion can go away from you because you are a target of these techniques. But at the end of the day, I was elected, and I was elected in the first round, so without runoff. And this is for me kind of reassuring. Yes, you can argue that I am senator of Prague, so it is easier, this is capital. But not so far. My first-hand experience is that if you keep explaining to people what is at stake, what you try to do, even though this is far beyond our own potential as members of parliament to have a real say in this, but we try to maintain the bridges open, people at the end of the day support you. And this is maybe my first lessons learned for the security guarantees and peace. What will work and voters will support. This is probably my first idea, that if you keep sticking to the heart of the security and keep explaining that without the link between security there is no prosperity, and without bold investment in our defense there is no future for our societies, people come to me, even elder people, and tell me, I would like to give more for defense. And I think that this is now the time to execute that our governments, even though there is a smoke screen of manipulation and manipulative techniques that we are all target of, that we keep messaging the heart that of this situation which is so fragile and which we see in Ukraine. By the way, and this is my last idea, thank you for our friends and partners in Ukraine to have us here, because when we visit you, we understand that our priority setting is force and that we have to accommodate somehow. And I think that by visiting you, we realize that we have to do much more. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to bring Brendan in now. I mean, listening to particularly to a Czech politician talk reminds one that, you know, security guarantees provided by Britain and France before the Second World War didn't work out so well. So, so what lessons, you know, and it wasn't the only case where European countries have tried to offer security guarantees. So as you think of historical lessons, what should we be thinking about?
Thank you very much, and it's a great privilege to be here on this panel. As Gideon says, I'm not an elected representative, I'm a historian, so I'll speak very briefly from that perspective. I'm in favor of the UK deploying troops into Ukraine, irrespective of an American backstop. And the reason I say that is that actually, if we look at what happened in 1919, immediately after the First World War, there was a question of what security guarantee would there be for the post-war order. And the French wanted a British guarantee, and the British said, we'll only give that guarantee if the Americans guarantee that guarantee. And so you can see this becomes a dance, and in the end the whole thing unravels, and the result was what ultimately what Gideon referred to was the total collapse of the order, and the Americans then coming in later once things had very much deteriorated. The other cautionary tale is Bosnia. I was born late 1960s, so I came of age in the 1990s politically, and for me actually Bosnia was really what Ukraine is now, a kind of a trauma actually. And what went wrong there, among other things, was the deployment of a peacekeeping force with a mandate that effectively solidified Serbian aggression. And so I think we would need to be very clear that if the troops are to go in, that they do so with a very clear mandate, not with any idea that they're somehow separating some communities, which would be to follow a Russian Federation narrative, but very clearly to keep the Russian Federation out. And from that point of view, I'm not clear in my own mind whether forward deployment of ground troops is the best option, the risk of turning them into hostages, and perhaps they have more to learn from the Ukrainians than the Ukrainians have from them, but rather to provide a guarantee in terms of air defense or no-fly, which seems to me much more closely represents the added value from the UK and the Western, or the broader European side. I've got a few things to say about maintaining popular support, but I'll come back to that maybe later.
No, go on.
Well, the thing that I think is very important is that we don't conflate the support for Ukraine with the culture wars in the West generally. We saw how disastrous that can be in the speech given by Vice President Vance. Unfortunately, there is a constituency in the United States and also many European states which has somehow got it into its head that to be a conservative and to be skeptical about certain developments in society is somehow to be pro-Russian. I personally am a conservative in many ways. I can keep two things separate in my head. One is the state of Western European societies, which one can argue with, and the other is whether or not Ukraine has been unjustly attacked, which is perfectly plain. So I would rather put the emphasis not so much on abstract values, but on very clear principles of democracy and sovereignty. And these are the things that are under attack. And all Europeans and all Americans, whatever side they take in the so-called culture wars, should be able to subscribe to those. That would be my only plea.
Thank you. It might also be added when it comes to values or principles are the most fundamental principle of international order is territorial integrity, and you don't commit aggression. Irrespectively, I would say, of the nature of the regime in question. It's not that sort of it is allowed to do aggression even against dictatorships, even regimes that we profoundly dislike. We are not allowed to have aggression against their particular countries. So that is a fundamental, the most fundamental principle of the international order, and that is obviously violated here. There's going to be a very important vote in the UN General Assembly in a couple of hours, where, as you know, what happened immediately after the full-scale invasion in the Russian one was that there was a vote in the UN General Assembly which condemned the aggression and called for the restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. That was voted with 141 nations supporting it, 5 nations opposing it. Don't need to mention the names, but it's a laundry list of dubious people. And I think roughly 30 abstaining. Now it's very, very critical what's going to happen, because evidently the Americans don't want to repeat this. They have proposed another resolution which says virtually nothing, takes away aggression, takes away territorial integrity, it takes away everything. The Europeans, including Ukraine, have proposed the resolution on territorial integrity and against aggression, and that's a fairly unique thing in sort of modern Western transatlantic history, that we on fundamental issues might be voting against each other in the UN General Assembly. We will see how that vote ends up. That's going to be interesting to see, but it's certainly worth watching, to put it very mildly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll know in a couple of hours what happens, but since we have not only a former Prime Minister but a former Foreign Minister, explain to us the stakes as France considers whether it would veto an American resolution put forward by the United States. Is that possible? And I guess I can understand why one might do it. Britain may even have to think about doing it, but then you have to think through the second-order consequences of what would Trump do in response to that.
Could I just say, that's in the Security Council. Yeah. But the big resolution is the General Assembly. But
yes, I think the question is for now at the General Assembly, and I'm not sure they are following us in DC, but I don't want to spoil the meeting between my president and President Trump with declarations that could be used and instrumentalized. But I think what we are seeing with this debate, and it's completely frightening, is a question about will there still be what we call an Occident, Western values. The West always had values, and what we are seeing right now could be some sort of the end of the West as we knew it, and I think that's what the most frightening. But the worst is never sure. So, and just I wanted to say something. We had a lot of questions about how to convince our citizens to keep on helping Ukraine. And of course, principles and values are always important to remember, and we must always remember what is at stake, which is freedom, democracy, and territorial integrity. But I think it's not enough. And you have to explain actually to the citizens what is at stake for them personally. And that's what we tried to do, explaining, well, you've been complaining about inflation, and you're right about complaining about inflation. But what will happen if Russia wins? The sanctions will also concern the economy, the agriculture, which today is Ukraine, if it becomes Russia. So the inflation on food will be even higher, and it's the same for energy. You've been complaining about migration waves through the continent. If Russia wins, it will be worse. And I think we cannot, as politicians, limit ourselves to the principles and values. We also must explain very concretely what is at stake for the citizens personally.
I think we're encouraged, Carl, to go to the audience. I'm going to, if I may, pick on somebody who's not even on this. Is that Steve Began over there? Could I ask you, I mean, so if a lot of Europeans are looking at, I should explain, you know, senior State Department official and worked for Trump, you know, on North Korea and other issues. When Europeans look at this resolution from the Americans and say, gosh, the Americans aren't willing to call out aggression, you know, that is catastrophic, and it does raise this question of whether there's a community of values. Can you calm us down and tell us actually it's not that bad?
I won't do that. It's that bad. It's that bad, but it's not the end of the process either. If you are going to find reassurance, it's in the long game. It's not in this resolution. There's a lack of historical knowledge and moral courage on display currently in Washington, D.C. So, so we say it's not the end of the process. The trouble is these guys have been elected for 4 years. Do you think they're going to find their moral courage in the next 6 months? Or? I think this is the third resolution, and the war goes on. Let's not hang our hat on a UN resolution to end the war. Let's end the war the way it should be ended, with a Ukrainian victory.
I think Pat Cox wanted to come in, former President of the European Parliament, but also extensive negotiator on all sorts of issues in Ukraine.
I'm looking at time to win up there, and I think the issue we're on is time, whenever and however it comes, to win a sustainable peace. I'm very taken what Brendan Sims said, and I want to come back to it. Back in the time when the Bosnian War was real and a hot war, General Philippe Marion from France was in charge of the UN peacekeeping mission. And Philippe Marion came to join my liberal group after he left the French army and after the experience in Bosnia. And I remember talking to him in depth about that experience and about the personal shame that he felt, because the nature of the mandate for peacekeeping, the rules of engagement, permitted lightly armed troops to defend themselves if attacked, but not to engage with another military force in any other act of aggression. And 8,000 dead bodies were discovered and buried eventually in Srebrenica as a result. So if we want to talk about security, whether it's Europe or backstops or whatever, rules of engagement, learning lessons from the past, and knowing that in hard circumstances, the rules may require hard responses. And if it's fuzzy logic, light arming, and soft rules of engagement, forget sustaining and winning the peace.
Mr. Fischer,
thank you. Before we continue, two interventions I'd like to have. The Vice President of the Ukrainian Parliament, Rada, Alexander Kornienko, if I remember it rightly. Yes, quite. And after that, just to advance our Korean friend. But first you, Alexander.
Thank you, Excellency, dear colleagues. It's great pleasure to be here with such honorable place and very important discussion all day. But I want to share with you our memory from these days 3 years ago, while we were at calm. If you ask me to give a short answer and simple answer, I would say it's about common actions that was based on common values. And I think now for us in Europe, it's very important formula. We have these common values, we have it. I very agree with you, we stand on that. But we need more common actions. And these actions very understandable for us in Ukraine and very necessary. But for Europe, it's some not simple steps. But you need to do these steps in memory of our heroes, but in about your future without such memories about your possible heroes. Stand with Ukraine, please support us, and please give us security guarantees. Let's do it together. Ukraine can be good part of this, best part of this, the best ground troops in the Europe right now in Ukraine. Please join us. We will help you. The best drone army in Ukraine right now. Please join us. We will help you. But we need difficult but very necessary steps from your side. Please do it together. Thank you very much.
What happens here in Ukraine is going to be important for the security of Europe, but it has global ramifications. And there's also the case that perhaps what is happening in other parts of the world gives some lessons and experiences that might be of value for us as well. We have with us here a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, and now I'm going to be on deep waters with your name. Yong-Vyon-Yu?
Yeah.
Well, something like that.
You call me you, very easy.
You, okay, thanks. You. The word, the floor, you, is yours.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but with the English, so I read my prepared comment. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Yong-Won Yu, a member of National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, representing the People Power Party. As a former military journalist and a member of the Korean National Assembly, it's an honor to address you today at this important conference. I would like to thank Boris Roge and the YES conference organizers for the kind invitation. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that the peacekeeping force of 200,000 troops would be necessary to ensure security following the war. It's my hope that many European countries send a unified message in favor of securing Ukraine's future. As a member of the Korean National Assembly, I would like to tell you about the Korean War. 75 years ago, the Korean War broke out. Much like Ukrainians, Koreans fought to survive to be free people, not slaves. After over 3 years, the war ended in a ceasefire, largely through the efforts of the US military and other UN forces. Since then, US military in Korea has played a crucial role in safeguarding the free democracy of Republic Korea for 72 years. In 1950, Korea fought for its survival. Today, in 2025, Ukraine is under very similar circumstances. In a world shaped by political ideologies, no nation is immune from the threat of invasion. Having experienced the struggle to protect liberal democracy 70 years ago, Korea can relate deeply to the pain and the challenges Ukraine faces. As a member of the Korean National Assembly, I remain committed to the supporting peace in Ukraine. I hope that today's conference will serve as a catalyst for progress toward the peace, bring us one step closer to a resolution of this conflict. Thank you.
Mr. Fischer, you wanted to respond to something earlier. Oh.
Thank you. I wanted just to highlight the message of Pat Cox. Thank you very much for your remark of how important was for the deployment of the troops in Western Balkans to see the clear mandate. Because the devil is in details. We cannot anticipate oftentimes what might happen next, and if the mandate is not completely strong for any situation, we can be really in trouble. And I think that we should also speak not only about mandates, but also about deterrence. And this is something that we can work right now. We, as community, within the NATO, for instance, we have a huge potential of deterrence. But to maintain it and to develop it, we have to work on it, be it on strategic level, communication, but also armaments and strategic weapons. And here I see that we have many potential to develop and to work. Thank you.
Could I ask you, because the Czech Republic is the center of Europe in some sort of way. You have elections coming up in Czech Republic. We've seen developments in the Slovak Republic going off in one direction. We had an election in Austria. Now they've formed a somewhat more decent government that there was a risk of them forming just a couple of weeks ago. So we've seen political developments in the center of Europe having some disturbing elements. We will have an election in Romania, which looks very worrying. We've seen interference and fragility of the political stability. From your vantage point in the heart of Europe, how do you see these things developing, including sentiments prior to your own election?
Thank you for the very simple question. I think that it is difficult to anticipate because 1 week is in political life extremely long if we take into consideration of the challenge of all the challenges. Nevertheless, yes, it were rather easier to keep the strategic communication on a very focused level before the late elections in Slovakia. For us, we are now concerned by the messages that comes from our neighbor and country which is so close to us. It might have some impact on strategic level of perception of threats, and as far as the result of the coming elections in September, legislative elections, I can speak about the challenges more in detail in the corridors I'm ready for.
And I see on a list I've got of people who have registered want to say that we have the Deputy Chair of the EU Committee of the National Council of the Slovak Republic. Is that correct? Yes. So you can answer the question.
Or not. Thank you. So my name is Beata Jurik, and I'm deputy chair of the European Committee in Slovak National Parliament. So please don't be afraid. I'm not a member of the coalition, but of the opposition. So I have nothing to do with Fico and his government. Well, I come from a country where it became normal to say that Russia had really good, serious reason to attack Ukraine, where it's normal to say that Ukraine is responsible for the war and for all these 3 years. From the country where Ukraine is all the time attacked by our government, and where government representatives say that it's Ukraine who is currently attacking the EU. Imagine. I come from a country where only today deputy chair of the parliament said, like Trump, that Ukraine should pay back all what we gave to the country. I'm not Russian, I'm not American, I'm Slovak. So imagine. I come from a country where the word peace won 2 elections, national and presidential, to this populist government which used it. But imagine what was the meaning of the word peace on all these billboards. Can you imagine? It was Ukraine should not fight. Ukraine should put guns down and there will be peace after. Well, I don't know what you think about it, but I don't agree with this translation or with this meaning of peace. And opponents of this government were treated by a very ugly word, war incitators. These words, peace, war, work really good in campaigns. And if the main topic of this panel is how we should talk to voters, then I would say we should use the same words. People are afraid, and it's normal that they are afraid because fear is the strongest emotion, I think. And they are afraid to send their sons and daughters to the war. And it's normal. I'm afraid for my kids as well. But the problem is that they don't fear the guy that our sons and daughters will fight against on the border. They don't fear Putin. And I will share with you a piece of memory. 3 years ago, I was walking with my son in Brussels, because we lived there 3 years ago, and I told him that Russia attacked Ukraine. And he was 7 at the time. And he answered me like, Mom, Ukraine is in Slovak border, so what does it mean? That then Putin, he will come to Slovakia as well, and maybe grandma will die, or maybe the uncle will die? And I was like, oh my God, he's so smart. At 7, he already understands what some adults can't understand. And today we said several times that we should stick together, now or never, with Ukraine, but also within the EU. And don't take me wrong, I understand that it's not easy to sit on the same table with people like Fico and Orban, who are trying to destroy the EU from inside. But please don't abandon our people, don't abandon our countries, because this is also the problem of language, because if they don't speak with you, then all these populists will take all this part of Europe, and maybe Czech Republic as well. These populists say America first, Slovakia first, Hungary first. What does it mean? It means that they have nothing in common, contrary to us, because we share values, freedom, human rights, peace, but we have to find some way of how to communicate this to people. And I completely agree with what Madame Kumpula-Natri said, and also with Monsieur Attal. We have to change our language, and I don't want to say that we have to play with the fear. It's what populists do. But we have to explain to people, and I really don't like it, because I would love to live in a world where everybody is, where everything is based on solidarity, when everybody cares about others. But unfortunately, this is not the world that we live in. But let's talk to people in their ordinary language. Let's say them that what my son understood 3 years ago, they should understand it as well. And if today Ukraine is attacked, then tomorrow it can be Slovakia. If today Putin and his soldiers are raping Ukrainian women, then tomorrow it will be Slovak women. If today Ukrainian sons, but also daughters, and I'm really proud of a female part of the Ukrainian army, are fighting against Putin, then tomorrow it will be us. And we should be afraid of this. Thank you.
On my list here, if you are still, I also have a member of the Parliament of Austria. If we are still in the, there we are, Wolfgang Gerstl, member of the Parliament of Austria, still in the heart of Europe.
Well, thanks a lot. Yes, we had 5 months ago we had the elections, and a right-wing party made the run, and we tried to build a coalition with the other parties, not with the right-wing one. We couldn't manage it. We started with the right-wing party, and you can't imagine what we had to live in. Yeah? The situation was so crazy that you can't imagine. They wanted to get out of the Convention for Human Rights. They wanted that we will not accept the jurisdiction of the European Court. They wanted to get out of all international agreements and treaties we have and evaluate them. They wanted to make laws only for foreigners. Also, if we want to protect us for terrorism, and they said it's only good if this is a law only against foreigners. Doesn't matter if these are Austrians. Then we can't do it because they support their own people who are against Corona, who are against. So they want to save all the people who are from the right-wing party, from the right-wing NGOs also. So they say we want to make different laws for Austrians and for foreigners. They don't accept the protection for messengers because they have radicalized them in Telegram channels, and so it was impossible to form a coalition with them. But many people, they think this is the only way to get out of the problems we have in Central Europe, to get out of this mess of asylum seekers, to get out of inflation, and they don't understand why we can't get any more Russian gas. So it's right the opposite one, like the French colleague on the left side from you said before. They think the opposite one. Yeah? They think if we can get gas, the living will be cheaper, and they think they can still live in an island of blessed ones. Yes, so Austrians they live in the neutrality. They think if you are neutral and you can't be against anybody, then your life will be better. And as far as we see it, now we have the same situation for Europe. It's not only Austria, which is not any longer an island of blessed ones. It's also Europe. It's not a continent only for blessed ones. We have to do by ourselves. We have to operate by ourselves. We have to increase our expenses for defense matters. We have to increase our economy also by our own. And so I think the strengthness we need is really, really now important, very, very important. And to support the voters in the way that we are thinking here, I think we will need more testimonials from the people on the border, from the people who are living quite close to Russia, from men and women who are suffering there, and see why they are still fighting. They are fighting for freedom. And if you fight for freedom, then you go on, because to be a slave, it's not the future. And that we have to tell the people that if you like freedom, you have to fight for freedom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to work down the list. If that's there's still some people who have put their names down to speak. Is Dimitris Karidis there from the Greek Parliament, the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee and head of the Greek delegation to NATO?
Yes, here. Well, I'm delighted by the quality of the discussion. Thank you very much for enlightening us all. It's really great. I'm going back to Athens tomorrow a bit encouraged by the fact that I have identified a very distinct shift among our European partners, especially from the north and the west, like Britain, who used to be committed Atlanticists, and now they themselves started talking about the strategic autonomy and emancipation of Europe. And I think this is very positive. I come from a nation, Greece, that has defended that together with our French friends all along. It was long in the making. I think it's an over-exaggeration to blame it all on Trump. The disengagement of America from Europe has started long ago. Trump is obviously an accelerator. And as far as if it took a few statements of his lately to wake us all up, so much the better. And so now we have a very distinct project ahead to take it from where the French left it back in 1952 with Pleven. Better late than never, even if it's 75 years later. Now, I have a problem with the continuous talking about values and values and values. Obviously, we have the democratic values and we are liberal democracies and all this and that. But this obsession about values seems to me is also part of the pathology of Europe and its inability to speak the hard talk of interests away from values. And we have to be sincere with ourselves because we have interests, and we have a very specific, concrete interest not to see Russia win this war and dominate Europe and European security architecture of the future. And there should be nothing wrong about that. I think there is a certain narcissistic pathology in trying to portray ourselves so much superior to the rest of the world and so self-righteous that we only do values and we don't have interest. And in that sense, we open ourselves to attacks from others for being hypocritical, because obviously we are not always consistent with upholding the values that we claim we do. One only has to look at the Middle East and what is happening there to understand this kind of inconsistencies. So better stick with the interests and the common interests and the very strong interests that we have to be on the safer ground. And in that regard, I would like to ask our French and British friends in the panel, one of the basic asymmetries of power is the nuclear thing in Europe. We are faced with a nuclear superpower. Russia might have many deficiencies, but when it comes to nuclear, it's really a superpower. And we have only two small nuclear powers in Europe, France and Britain. France is now a member of EU. Britain is no longer. I wonder if you are willing to place that force under European joint command in order to avoid the alternative, which might be a nuclear Germany. So I wonder, in that big discussion about the security architecture and what to do now that the American umbrella might be no more, when it comes to the nuclear issue, if there is such a discussion in France and obviously in Britain. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I will ask the Prime Minister to have some... No, not yet. I think I will ask you to have some concluding comments towards the end, and that you can contemplate this particular issue until then. Because we have a couple of others. We have Ina Corsero of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Parliament of Moldova. Do we? There you are. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm coming from a small Moldova, and what I would like to start with is that we understand how bravely and courageously Ukrainians are fighting for the European democracy, and I even can't imagine what would happen to my country if that would not be so. And we say that in Moldova we have peace due to brave Ukrainians. And this is the main message of the events which are happening in Kyiv today, that unity and continue supporting Ukraine is extremely necessary, not to see the war going beyond the Ukrainian borders. In Moldova, we continue to fight for democracy. And the last elections, which were held in Moldova, presidential elections, they identified those threats which we need to tackle all together. And the hybrid threats which Moldova has seen the last autumn were of enormous proportions, and the interference in the election process, which really determined the final result that we had. But still, Moldova resisted, and we understand that we will face even bigger hybrid threats for the parliamentary elections we have this year. And the main conclusions that we are making today all together is that unity is enormously important to continue fight for security in Europe, and enlargement is one of the guarantees for security in the European Union. And building on the defense capacities for the whole European continent, but also capacities to tackle hybrid threats and defend the digital borders is extremely important, seeing what happened also to other European countries, not just Moldova. In Moldova, we still have political parties in the parliament today which are connected to Russia and which are wearing T-shirts on which we can see the inscription Putin team, and they have messages from the tribune of the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova. And these are the guys who are bringing hundreds of millions of dollars into the country and disseminating it as an electoral corruption, but also disseminating propaganda and fake in order to influence election. We have also another card, which is a strong card played by the Russian Federation starting with this year, and this is Transnistria region. And this is also an objective we need to concentrate all together, because a democratic and European Moldova is an additional guarantee for the security of Ukraine. So we are looking forward to generate these solutions together to secure our digital borders and to protect the Western values, which are well known by our diaspora, because we see the mobilization of Moldovan diaspora in EU countries. We have more than 1 million Moldovans living in different EU countries, and this is our army, actually, which protects democracy and which protects the European values. But we need to be strong in the countries as well, with the real information on the true European values. So I agree with Ms. Kumpula-Natri that we need to speed up. We all sense that there is more and more mobilization from all the European countries, and we see this these days in Kyiv as well. But speeding up is the slogan that we need to go forward together. So thank you very much.
Thank you. David Burton Sampson, House of Commons. There you are.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am from the UK Parliament, Member of Parliament, and I'm also Vice Chair for the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Ukraine. And one thing I just want to start saying, before we can even get to talk about sustainable security and peace, we need to get to that stage of peace. And one thing I'll reiterate from my Prime Minister, my boss, is that that peace will not come without Ukraine around the table. And that is critical. Now, I am here with a delegation of 15 UK parliamentarians, including Alex. And we've been travelling around the country since Friday and meeting with communities and visiting high streets and the whole lot. And the thing that really strikes me is the resilience of the Ukrainian people. They are getting on with life in the face of adversity. From the small villages and towns to the bigger cities, they are getting on with things, and there is the ingredients for starting to get sustainable security and peace. Is those brilliant Ukrainians who are here doing it now. And I'm delighted that the UK has signed up with President Zelensky to the 100-year partnership. And I think this is really, really important, because this is a long-term commitment for the UK to work closely with Ukraine on not just defence, but national security, cyber security, serious organised crime, working together and working jointly. This is not just about the UK giving, it's about what Ukraine can give to us too. And we've got to be very clear, there's an awful lot Ukraine can give to the rest of the world, including the UK. And it talks about trade as well, it talks about working together on energy projects, it talks about rebuilding and societal change as well. And I think this type of partnership is really, really vital. Having this put down in words and signed cross-government now is vital. And of course, we all know that we've got to work together as a European community and as NATO to protect Ukraine and to get its sovereignty back. So I'm delighted with the support the UK is planning to give moving forward. This is all about collaboration. We've got to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you. And Thomas Pellerin Karlin, I think, member of the European Parliament. There you are. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So, member of the European Parliament elected in France. So we have invested almost all our time asking ourselves what we can do to support Ukraine, and that is good. But my question is, how can we weaken Russia? The Russian military budget last year was 140 billion euros. The Russian fossil fuel revenues last year was 250 billion euros. So two quick questions. Do you think the EU should continue to buy Russian liquefied natural gas? We have 3 MPs in the room. I would be happy to have your 3 answers. Second question, shouldn't we increase our engagement with countries like India, who are currently buying Russian oil and gas, but we know we will live in a better world from a security and a climate perspective if we could work with India to ensure that they use more Danish wind power, more Polish electric buses, or more French or German heat pumps. So what can we do also globally to make sure that we weaken the capacity of Putin to turn fossil fuels into money and money into a direct threat to Ukrainian and European democracy?
Thanks. And the last on my list, and then I have Marie-Louise as well. Jukka Kopra from Finland is here? Or is not here? Okay, Marie-Louise. Back from Germany, and prominent campaigner in Germany in favor of Ukraine.
Just behind you.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not a parliamentarian anymore. I've been parliamentarian for more than 30 years. And know the times of Kohl and Angela Merkel. Many mistakes and bad responsibility we took into our politics. For example, building Nord Stream 2 after Crimea had already been annexed. And this brings me to the point why I'm not as optimistic as you are. What we have now within our countries is populations which see that the world is changing very fast. Digitalization, energy is getting more expensive, food is getting more expensive, and they do not really see and understand that Russia is their problem number one. We have had in Germany in the elections 25% of right and left-wing parties pro-Russian, and that is Germany. And in the eastern states of federal Germany, those who should be so happy that they gained freedom in 1990, they elected the right wings with 40%. So we are having a problem in our country and in the campaigns. And somebody like Friedrich Merz, who knows about the necessity of transatlantic alliance and who knows that we should have supported Ukraine militarily much more, he was not very outspoken about that during the campaign. We had social democratic campaigning saying we can't make our pensioners pay for the Ukrainian war. And this ugly thinking, the propaganda, this poison, we don't only have it in Germany. We hear about Nigel Farage in Great Britain. We have Orban, we have Le Pen. So what is happening is that what we would have called a pro-Western thinking, democratic thinking in our country, it is shrinking, it is at stake, and Russian propaganda is very deep, already has become getting deep into people's brains in our countries. So now I want to make a short contradiction to you who were also agreeing on this unity. I'm not convinced that creating this unity within EU is going to be fast enough. The Danish Prime Minister this morning said in the summit, I think we have 2 months to go. And that's an unbelievable short time. I think what we need now is really a coalition of the willing, which, and I talk about the German perspective, means that please, you European countries, Finland, Denmark, Poland, Romania, that you tell the main capitals, which is France and Germany, we are going ahead now, and it's your duty to follow. They will tell you that raising and rebuilding military possibilities to even produce the stuff we need will take a very long time. It's not just going like that. And we know that the reality, unfortunately, at the Ukrainian border in front is that often Ukrainian soldiers do not even have enough bullets to shoot at the enemy coming from the other side. I do not want to be the pessimistic voice here, but I think there is more urgency, and I have to admit I was a little upset this morning about so many speakers, representatives, presidents, MPs from all those European countries with too many empty words. I felt very bad for President Zelensky being polite enough not to end it with harsh words. It's not going to go this way, and in this aspect, the Americans are right to say, come on, you guys, it's within Europe. They said it in Bosnia, and then it took 3 weeks until they finally had to finish the killing, and I don't know whether they're going to do it again. But time is really much more important now, and strong voices. I would like a coalition of the willing first press, us Germans, Paris, and all the others.
Thank you. And before I ask the Prime Minister to say some concluding words, just give some words of optimism. I'm also chair of the board of the European Council on Foreign Relations. And one of the things we do, rightly or wrongly, we do fairly extensive opinion polls. And when we look at those, we find that support for Ukraine is very solid all over Europe. You are not surprised that it's very strong in Poland or Sweden or Lithuania, but it's very strong in, say, Portugal, Spain, it's Greece, fairly, well, by Greek standards, fairly. Yeah, we talk about an Orthodox country with a different historical relationship with Russia. So it's amazingly strong. While recognition or support for Russia or the prestige of Russia, you can't even measure it, how much that has been declining all over Europe. So that is where public opinion is, in spite of the struggles that we have in our respective countries with the marginal forces that are thinking otherwise. But Prime Minister, final words to you.
Thank you, and I'll be quick because I think we are already late, but I'll try to answer to the few questions that were asked to me. First, our German colleague, because you said I'm anxious about Europe because we have Orban, we have Le Pen. We don't have Le Pen. No, it's important to say. Last summer, President called for elections. Every polls, everyone was saying we will have Le Pen in power in the summer. And we campaigned, and Le Pen is not in power in France. I lost my job, and politics are a mess in France, but we don't have the far right, and we will keep on campaigning and fighting to avoid that in France. It was important for me to say it. Our Greek colleague asked whether is it a debate in France to transfer our nuclear button to the EU. No, it's not a debate in France. There's not a single party defending this idea, and I'm not sure it would be very popular. But our nuclear weapon in France was defined very early as being used. That it will be used if our vital interests were at stake. And no one remembers that, few remember that Jacques Chirac, President Chirac, in I think 2006, had a very important speech where he said that our vital interests are also the vital interests of our European allies. So I think it's important to remember that, because it was in Chirac's speech and our president never contradicted this idea. I agree with my French colleague about liquefied gas. Just what we've been hearing shows that Europe is at a do or die moment, because our values mean nothing if we're not ready to do everything to defend them. And I have to say, I try not to be too optimistic, but I think it's possible. I think we are seeing right now the last illusions dropping. I think we will act. I think we will build a European defense. I think we will have, I don't know, Eurobonds or common debt to invest way more in our defense. I think we will have a preference for European defense industries. I think we will integrate more in the EU in order to defend our autonomic strategy. I think it's possible. And I think it's possible, and I will answer to my Slovakian colleague, because you said there is so much fear in the EU and the populists are rising thanks to this fear. But what the Ukrainian people has shown us over the last 3 years, magnificently, is that hope is way stronger than fear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And we give the word immediately to our President Kwasniewski for his final words.
So that's
Chairman of the board of YES has to be said.
Thank you very much.
Ex-President of the Republic of Poland. In
Yes.
case...
Let's say very successful president.
Yeah, he said it.
Dear friends, thank you very much. So, short speech, summarize. First, we as a YES, as a board of YES and founder of YES, Viktor Pinchuk, we are very grateful to all of you to be today here together. It's very significant day, third anniversary of beginning of Russian aggression against Ukraine, and I think even these two events, our in Hyatt Hotel and organized by President Zelensky, important meeting in Interconti Hotel with 13 leaders of the states and many online. So it shows that Ukraine still is on our radar. We think, we know that that is probably existential issue for all of us today and in the future. I want to thank organizers, the team led by Svetlana Kowalczuk and her colleagues. Please applaud her, because really that is a great job. You know, they changed the location and some more political remarks. First, we remember very well, and especially it happened during Munich Security Conference before Russian aggression. It was 1 week earlier. What can happen? And mainly, majority didn't believe that the war will start. War started. Then the next point was how long Ukraine will survive. 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. We have 3 years of the war, and I think that is absolutely time to say how we respect this Ukrainian determination, fight, organization, and everything. And heroism, because really that is a symbol of unbelievable heroism. And I think now is a time for huge applause for this 3 years of fight Thank you. And thank you. And we know that they are fighting not only for the sovereignty, they are fighting not only for independence, they are fighting for our common values. Sometimes I use this sentence many times. They are fighting not only for them, they are fighting instead us. Instead us. Especially I'm speaking on behalf of Poland. So that is something what is part of the history, and we should know it, respect it, and that's point number one. Point number two, we have a new moment, is negotiations. And of course, we want to have peace, and peace is fantastic. But peace, please sit down, because you know me, you know me, especially during the evenings. I am speaking probably too long, too long. But no, I try to be brief. So, negotiations, peace is okay, but peace cannot be only the frozen war. The peace should be based on the values. The peace should means that is a just peace with understanding of all Ukrainian sentiments. Because we cannot say that peace is if the aggressor will fulfill all own goals. That is not a peace. So that is my appeal to especially American friends to understand that Russia, what I said some minutes, some hour before, Russia and Putin wants to have entire Ukraine in his hands. Entire. That is not a place for compromise. That is not a place for some deal. He knows he can do it step by step. He can make different tactics. He can organize different approaches to that. But his main goal is to have entire Ukraine in Russian zone of influence. Why? Because the dream, the plan, the obsession of Putin is to rebuild great Ukraine, great Russia. Great Russia cannot exist without Ukraine, and that is the problem. If you want to make effective negotiations, necessary to understand that is a problem. And next point is Europe. Of course, we Democrats, we Europeans, we have a problem because in front of us we have ruthless power, we have lies, we have quite effective propaganda, not bad diplomacy. We have Russia. And how to fight with these behaviors, how to fight with such words, how to fight with such statements, etc. We have to be as much as possible connected with our general values, because that is our power, moral advantage. We know what means democracy, we know what means human rights, we know what means sovereignty, and we know what means something what our colleagues from the countries with more, I will not name nobody, but he was sitting here, with some imperial history, they don't understand. That imperial countries, they tell us many times about the pride, about the power, about the historical role, but they don't understand sensitivity of smaller partners. We know it. We know it very well in Baltic states, in Poland, in Ukraine. If you want to organize better world, we have to understand this sensitivity. We should respect this sensitivity each other. Then we have a chance to survive, we have a chance to build the peace and a good future. So we Europe, what you said, expressed many times during this day, we should be united, we should show the solidarity, we should work together, and we have enough power to fight. We have enough power to win, because more than 500 million population, well-educated, good economy, a lot of money, frankly speaking, as well. And that is necessary to use all the things for all of us, and especially to support Ukraine and to change this situation by negotiations to time to win, because we have finally to win. If we want to see a better future of the world, Ukraine has to win, and we should support Ukraine to win. And last point, and now I need, because you know that my hobby is to collect the anthems from many countries, because in my opinion, don't worry, I will not sing. No, no. The anthem is an example of the spirit of the nation, the spirit of the history, etc. Some years ago, I had a speech, maybe some of you remember, about the history of Soviet and Russian anthem. And that's an interesting story, because this anthem the music is composed by Alexandrov, very famous composer and founder of this military Alexandrovskaya. But the lyrics, the text was prepared by Sergei Mikhalkov. And first version was prepared when Mikhalkov in 1940, he was 27 only, old years old. And then he changed, Mikhalkov changed this text of Russian anthem during... Soviet anthem to Russia. No, during Soviet time. He changed by request of Khrushchev and then Brezhnev, and finally, 2000, he prepared a new text of new Russian anthem in the year 2000 when he was 87. So the first version he was 27, the last version 87, 60 years after. Huh? No, I will not. No, not this time. You know, who participated in this event with my singing, that is forever. You know, that's is. Huh? We have video. Okay, unfortunately. Okay, that's okay. And then, you know, no, but my conclusion, and I think I want to repeat this conclusion, was following. That if you want to understand Russia, this short analysis is very, very useful, because in Russia you can change the lyric, you can change the text, but music remains the same. Music remains the same. And I thought how to explain this situation of Ukraine. And I think the Ukrainian anthem is also good response for our thinking of Ukrainian mentality and the future of Ukraine. Because the first sentence, the first words of the anthem are «Ще не вмерла України і слава і воля». What means that Ukraine is existing, and this pride and the will is still alive. And I think that is something what should be the best conclusion of our meeting today, and some advice or even some duty for all of us to support Ukraine in the future, because Ukraine is existing, is strong, has a strong will, and will survive, even despite all these problems what we observe now. Please support Ukraine. Please be with Ukraine as strong, as much as possible. Ще не вмерла Ukraina, ni sława, ni wola. Thank you.